Welcome to the Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast on CHSN. We're brought to you by Toyota. Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand. Find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. Charlie Roumeliotis, I am Pat Boyle. Charlie, Hawks fall in Nashville 3-2 in a shootout. Yes, they get the point. They couldn't hold on to that third period, 1-goal lead. But somehow I felt better about it. I mean, I guess that's where we are this season. I loved the effort. Soderblom was fantastic. Bertuzzi's line with Nazar and Bertuzzi were buzzing. And so if I'm looking for little victories along the way to a eventual shootout loss, I think I got them last night.
Yeah, like we were talking during the game, after the first and second, we're like, Blackhawks have played well in this hockey game. And I know Nashville is not the greatest hockey team this season, but the first period, Nashville had 3 power plays and the Hawks had 0. And so you're like, okay.
And we outshot them too, which was surprising when, they had 3 power plays.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like at even strength, I think the shots on goal were like 8-2 in favor of Chicago. So I was like, okay, keep it at even strength and and so then the second period happens, they take the 2-1 lead, and then going into the third, the frustrating part was it was more of the Blackhawks played on their heels, not their toes, and so I think the shot attempts in the third period were like 30-9 in favor of Nashville, and so that's where things got a little dicey and tilted the Predators' way, but it was like they were 3 minutes away from picking up a regulation win. Arvid Söderblom was unbelievable in the third period and in overtime. And then, Pat, I don't know what it is, but Soderblom has had 3 shootouts now. 0 for 9. He has not made a single save yet in the shootout. This is like, do you remember a few years ago when Robin Lehner had those shootout yips? Like he's just like an unbelievable goaltender, but he couldn't stop a shootout.
So last night they were doing the slow down Kane approach. Have most of the teams been going to that book on? I can't recall the other previous 6 shooters.
Oh,
have they all been going that way?
I'm not sure, but I feel like we see it more and more. Like we saw Connor Bedard do the slowdown. We even in his first shootout attempt, he also did it last night. We've seen Evgeny Kuznetsov. I know he's not in the NHL anymore, but he does that really slow. And it's like, I don't know, maybe there's something to it where they're waiting for the goaltender to make the first move. But I don't know if it was a scouting report where they felt Soderblom was, maybe that's a weakness of his, but he was so good.
One other thing on that, and again, every coach is different. So under Q, they pretty much ended most practices, or at least morning skates with the shootout drill, right? Both ends.
Yeah.
And then when it went to Colleton, did he continue that?
I don't think he did.
No? Okay. So, but like under Luke and now Anders, they don't do it at all, really.
Yeah. And I mean, they haven't found themselves in a position to do it, but I think it's still a fun It's still a fun drill, even if you're not finding yourself in shootouts. It's a fun drill to do, but also when you are in that situation, you can go to the well. Even when the Hawks play 2-puck, remember when they did it with Patrick? Like they don't play that game anymore ever since Patrick Kane got traded, and so we remember asking like Philip Kurashev, and he's like, he's like when you play that game so many times, it forces you to think really deep go into the arsenal. And so I don't know, maybe it's like some sort of maybe they should try it, but yeah, the Soderblom thing, it like blows my mind because he played so well for whatever it was. He faced like 36 shots in the second, third, and overtime combined, and then it was just like couldn't stop a puck in the shootout.
All right, let's get to the Bedard line. Bertuzzi, Bedard, Nazar put together during the Calgary game, and they were together the entire game against Nashville. Bertuzzi ends up with 2 assists, 5 shots on goal, a couple of hits. Nazar, I think it's his best game as a pro. He had 6, even though he didn't register a point. He had 6 shots on goal, 2 hits. He was getting in on the forecheck. His wall work was great. He was creating odd man rushes, shorthanded breakaway. It's just a matter. I feel like it's the same conversation we had when Connor was mired in his goalless drought. Like when they start, they're going to kind of come in bunches. I think it's just a matter of time that Nazar breaks through and has like a 2-goal performance and goes on a 7 goals in 4 games type of run.
Yeah, I loved that trio yesterday. Even it was just fun watching them too, not just for entertainment reasons. Where you're like Bedard and Nazar, they think the game on the same level, and they're both playmakers. They like to generate offense, but that line doesn't work unless you have a guy like Bertuzzi on the other end to do some of the dirty work. And especially with Bedard and Nazar being more undersized forwards, like you need someone that can go retrieve pucks, park themselves in front of the goaltender, and try to loose or scoop up some rebounds or whatever that might be. You mentioned Bertuzzi with 2 assists, Nazar with 6 shots on goal, Bedard scoring. But how about that spinorama pass that he had to Tyler Bertuzzi too? It's just like, oh man, that would have made every highlight reel if that goes in.
How many times have we seen him do that this year, where it's usually he's on the left side and sometimes on the right, and he's got a man on him and he's trying to hit the trailer. The trailer has a man on him. I mean, and he's literally facing the opposite way, eyes in the back of his head, spins, and he puts it on the tape. Like, I mean, he's done that at least a half dozen times this year, if not more.
Yeah, and it's so weird how he's able to release the puck for the trajectory to go exactly where it needs to go to Tyler Bertuzzi. When you're doing a spinorama like that, it's how do you have control? It's so crazy how, I mean, he just slingshot it, and that was a zip of a pass. You know, like that was not, so unbelievable. That line was terrific together. And hopefully it stays that way for a string of games together, because it feels like the chemistry between the 3 of them could develop into something more offensive.
And you know what? We all know Tyler Bertuzzi's history of slow starts. And I'll be honest, I didn't see a ton of him with Toronto last year. I know he got love on the top line for a while. I am really impressed with Bertuzzi as of late. I mean, he has been like, he wreaks havoc in front of that net. He makes the Martinez goal. There's no way that puck caroms off the back wall and somehow goes off of UC Saros and finds the back of the net if he's not wreaking havoc in front. He is, he really does drive the Bedard production. And now you look at Bedard, 6 goals in his last 12 games, 21 points in his last 19 games. I don't know if the Nazar pairing is a long-term one, but it does go to show you, if there was more talent or more players that see the game like Connor does, I think we're getting glimpses of just how explosive 98 could be if he's paired with somebody who sees the game the same way and has a skill level that fits Connor's.
For sure. And I think that's why I've been banging the table, or my hand on the table, about putting Teravainen back on that line with Bertuzzi and Bedard, because it's like, man, I just want to see what the 3 of them could do together, even though it would diminish the depth of the bottom 3 lines. Seeing that trio together and Connor playing with legit NHL players would be fun to watch, and just kind of see like, okay, how much production can that line actually generate together, especially with the 3 of them on the same wavelength. And yeah, you mentioned, Pat, so Bertuzzi, like the first month of the season, I remember like watching games where I was like, did he play today? Like I like barely noticed him. And that now it's like, you're seeing him do all these, he's going to the right areas, and he's actually a really smart hockey player too. Like there have not been many games this year where I'm like, what was he thinking with that pass or with, like, I think the challenge with Bertuzzi and maybe why he gets off to such slow starts is he plays a game that is suited for the playoffs, right? And so it's like, how do you play that game
82
that's suited
games.
for April, May, and June, doing that in October? It's like, oh man, like you almost have to like pace yourself because there's kind of like a ramp up factor to the season. And but yeah, Bertuzzi has been so impressive. He's been probably their best Blackhawk over the last month and a half, and I've been super impressed with him.
How about the sauce pass to set up Bedard's 13th goal? I mean, he intercepts the pass off the half wall. He's in kind of a tight quarters and defender on, and he makes just that deft little pass to Connor on his backhand, who goes forehand and buries it. I mean, yeah, he does the things like going to the paint and wreaking havoc, but he also has that part of his arsenal, like a great pass that's totally set up Bedard's goal.
Yeah, he's a naturally gifted hockey player. Like he has the IQ, but he also makes those moves where you're like, oh man, like that's a special play for a guy that you don't really think of him in that way as like a guy that can make those plays, but he does those things that's why I'm sure he had success playing on a line with Austin Matthews and all these other great players in the past, where it's like he has the IQ to play with those kinds of guys and make the plays too. Because you can have the brain, but you don't have the skill set to match up with it, or you have the skill set, but you don't have the brain. He has both, and he plays a unique style of hockey that really complements Connor Bedard.
All right, so we're pumping Frankie Nazar's tires, and I think rightfully so. Again, the production hasn't jumped off the score sheet. I get it. But there's been growth at the faceoff circle. I thought there was a ton of growth last night. I mean, again, I didn't expect to see him. He's not a big, imposing guy, but like he used his body to his advantage. He won battles by getting in on the forecheck and using his speed to deliver a couple of hits. So, I mean, I think there's a lot to like from Frank. And again, we're early on in his career. So Corey Proman puts out his athletic top 140 23 and under prospects this past week. And again, a lot of these lists are for our purposes, fodder, barroom chat, podcast content. And just to kind of give you some of the names that are, so Macklin, Celebrini, Tim Stützle, and Connor Bedard were in his tier 1. I'll just go through some of the Hawks that are on this list. Tier 3, Artem Levshunov is there. He's actually ahead of Brock Faber. Tier 5, Lane Hudson, the great rookie defenseman for Montreal, was 39th. Kevin Korchinski, 66. Sam Renzel, 67. Kanserov, 73. Bovair, 89. Oliver Moore, 91. Lucas Reichel, 128. Colton Dock, 132. Frank Nazar, nowhere to be found. What do you say to that, Charlie?
It feels like I know Corey wasn't particularly high on Frank coming out of the draft or whatever as a prospect. And so it's almost like he just fell on the rungs. And then as he was doing his under 23 rankings, he just maybe forgot, or is just like, because I don't know.
How can you forget a guy that was near the top of the AHL in scoring, is an all-star at the AHL level, and on the team that he plays for, if they had to do a ranking today, they would have him higher than you have some of the guys that you ranked. I mean, they would have him. They'd have Nazar ranked higher than Reichel right now.
100%. And so I can't really explain why, but it even seeing Roman Kanserov on there, it's like, oh, that guy, like, he's in the 70s, right in that ranking. It's not like, even if you put Frank Nazar in the like 100s or whatever, have him on the list. I don't know, maybe that adds fuel to, not that he's reading it, but like,
well, I kind of wondered that. Like, and I'm watching last night's game. I'm I know he was asked about it. I think the CHGO guys asked him about it. I didn't see his response. I saw the headline. So I'm not trying to get into the psychology part of it, but I do wonder if that fueled him a little bit.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like, I'm looking at some of the names on this, like obviously Sasha Boisvert, Oliver Moore, 89, 91. There are guys that, and I would have to go back and look at where Corey had Frank on his like pre-draft rankings to see, like, because
it's not high.
fair enough. Like, but how? Because he was taken 13th overall. So where was he projected to go? Because there are some guys on this list that were like second round, third round picks, and so did he have those guys higher on his list relative to Corey, or relative to, I don't know.
And I have this beef, whether it's NFL draft situation or NHL draft. Once a draft expert, so-called expert, puts them in a certain silo, a tier, whatever, or whatever box they kind of put them in, it seems like they're in that box forever and they're attached to your pre-draft ranking. Like, can't you look and see that he's playing in the National Hockey League and has a couple of goals and is on a top line right now? Like, I mean, and you're comparing that to a guy who's playing, college hockey or in the KHL. I mean, like, I don't understand the comp.
I will say this too, and Corey Pronman obviously is incredibly well respected, and we respect him as well, because we have him on this podcast a lot. Absolutely. Because we respect his opinion. But I think putting together a list like this, where you're going 140 players deep, I mean, when we're talking about how are you separating 100 from like 120 to 120 to 130, I mean, it's all, you're splitting hairs, that almost feels like, or it's just kind of like dart throws. And so at the very least, it gets us talking about it. And so I think, I don't know, I don't put too much stock into lists like this, because the players on these lists are barely scratching the surface of what they could be in the NHL. And admittedly, it has a lot to do, like, a lot of these prospects that are on the list, their talent is one thing, but their environment and where they are is also plays a role. Like, if you have a top end prospect that's like in Buffalo or whatever, like, what's your confidence level of that guy turning into a superstar versus if he was in Tampa Bay, where they've been developing players left and right, so it's like that also plays a role to me. And it's not necessarily, oh, this player turned into a bust because he just wasn't a good player. It's like, no, the situation is everything too.
And if we all agree that the AHL is the best development ground for the National Hockey League, and time and again, we see players like Frank Nazar, like Lucas Reichel, literally light it up for long periods of time, and then they come to the NHL and it's a desert, like it's not like the AHL. So when you try to project what a talent level is doing in college, in the U.S. hockey, wherever, East Coast, wherever it is, I just find it's difficult to do. But then once you finally see them on the biggest stage, I don't know. I think, to me, you got to give that more credence than you do somebody getting on a heater against Michigan or Minnesota or, Bowling Green.
Right. Like, gone are the days where guys just go from, or not gone are the days, but it's very rare. Like, you have to be an elite prospect to just go from like juniors to the AHL to the NHL playing your exact normal minutes that you're used to playing. A lot of times it's like, we even see it with Frank Nazar now. When he was in Rockford, first line guy, first power play, first penalty kill unit, and he's probably logging 20 minutes of ice time in Rockford. Well, now he gets called up to the NHL, and he's probably in between like 12 to 13 minutes. And so it's like, naturally, there's just going to be some sort of progression where you have to ease your way into the NHL, because if you give him too much, then it could kind of be a little bit overwhelming. And so there is some sort of balancing act.
All right. We all agreed that Seth Jones probably turned in his worst Blackhawks performance in the Calgary game. Got to give him credit for a bounce back effort against Nashville. He was better defensively. Not a perfect game. Had the high sticking penalty in the first period that led to one of those 3 power plays, but picks up an assist on the Martinez goal. More active in the D zone, jumped in the offensive zone at offensive rush at times. So credit Seth for putting an ugly performance and answering all the questions that came with that, and then returning to the building where he was originally drafted by Nashville and turned in a solid performance against the Preds. Yeah,
and it was cool too because Nashville had honored some of their, what was it, like their internal Hall of Fame?
Yeah, Gold Jacket, Pekka Rinne.
Yeah, Shea Weber and David Poyle was on there. And it was cool that they let Seth Jones go out and take the ceremonial
that was cool
face off, because it was like that David Poyle is the guy that drafted Seth Jones. And so then he was there with his former teammates. And so really nice bounce back performance by Seth. And the thing I liked about it too, he had 5 shot attempts. Two of them hit the net. He had gone 3 straight games without a single shot on goal. So you saw that offensive attack mentality as well by shooting the puck that we haven't seen over the last few games.
We talked about Soderblom off the top, but I mean, gotta mention him, just how sensational he was. And you talked about the third period stopping 13 of 14, and credit them for, I mean, how many times once they've given up the game tying goal in the third period, are you just like, oh my God, like at least get a point out of it, and they don't. That's kind of where I thought we were trending last night. And then the 6 shots he stopped in overtime, it does make you wonder how he's had such a lack of success on the shootouts when for the better part of 65 minutes, he's flawless.
Yeah. Even watching the shootout, like he doesn't look uncomfortable in net, like when
it looks like he's deep though, is he a little deep?
Yeah, maybe it's something that's easily correctable. But like I remember watching Robin Lehner, and he was open about how he's like mentally, I don't know. And so some guys would like drive down, and you just saw like Robin's like he's like he doesn't know what to do. I don't see that with Arvid.
Remember we considered the idea of going to the other goalie for the shootout.
Yeah,
because the yips it was that prevalent.
Yeah, and obviously the other goalie at the time was Corey Crawford, so it was like, yeah, put that guy in that, even if he hasn't played in 65 minutes. Yeah, but again, I don't think though, like when I watch Soderblom in the shootout, like it doesn't look like he's like uncomfortable in there. It's just like the pucks are going in, and so maybe it is something that's easily correctable. But my oh my, was he good in overtime? I mean, especially there was that back and forth chance a few times, and you're like, oh, here it comes. And then Vlasic tries to pass the puck, and it's like, oh no, 2 on, and then
I know. Yeah, the save on Novak from the slot was tremendous. Did you agree with the Foligno goal being wiped off because of goalie interference?
So I thought it was interesting that the call on the ice was immediately no goal, right? And then they the Blackhawks challenge, and it was a fairly quick review. And it was like the call on the ice is confirmed. Like it wasn't call on the ice stands. It was call on the ice is confirmed. It's goalie interference. So it was a quick review, and it was confirmed, which tells me this was clear goaltender interference. I originally, like when I saw it quickly in real time, I thought maybe they were going to give the goalie interference to Reichel and not Foligno.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and then I saw the overhead view, and I was like, oh no, I don't think Reichel did anything there. And so, it was funny though seeing Foligno celebrate the way he did and like not realize that they got waved off. I was like, that's a celly he won't be able to get back.
It faked Rick Ball out because I think Rick was going with it being a goal, and then Panger had to jump in there. But like, again, this is the issue I have. This is to me on the rule book the grayest of rules. The role that Luke Shen had in cross-checking Foligno into Saros. I mean, what blame do you put on Shen for part of that contact?
Yeah, it feels like Shen pushes Foligno into Saros, but then there was an opportunity for Foligno to then exit the crease himself, and I thought he got pushed again on some level.
It's. I'll tell you what. I don't know what the answer is necessarily. I said it on the air last night. The NFL went through this with what's a catch about 10 years ago. And it was every year it was, the process to the ground and, did he make a football? Like there were different stages that rule went through. I feel like there needs to be some growth and some tweaking that can be done with this. I don't necessarily have the answer, but I don't like the fact that every time there's goalie interference, you and I, like it to me, it should be plain as day, right? Yeah. It either is or it isn't.
What's a bit frustrating for me too is the NHL will release like through their media, like, hey, the call on the ice at this time was confirmed in Nashville. It was goaltender interference, but it's never an elaborate response of why it was goalie interference. It's just like the call on the ice was this. We confirmed it was upheld because it was goalie interference according to rule of this. And it's like, okay, well, explain why. Like, explain Luke Shen pushes the forward into Saros. We felt that, but there is none of that. And it's like there's no transparency as to like why they felt that way.
And that's a great point, because I think baseball has now adopted that where they went after the challenge, they come on, use the mic, and enlighten the people that are watching at home and are in the stands. What would that take? 10 seconds to explain, the defender did push the offensive player into the goalie, but the goalie had, the offensive player had time to exit the paint and did not in ample time. Whatever the case may be, explain it. Just like our issue with why don't we always have the blue line camera on both sides for offside disputes? Why are we always trying to match camera angles that are nowhere near on the line, and then we're waiting for that after the explanation? I mean, that makes no sense either. So in this day and age where technology is at where it's at, and it's so important to the game and getting the calls right, share it with everybody. Let's watch it together. And then when you make a decision, explain that to the people your fans that are watching.
Yeah, totally agree. And I wonder too how much, like, who challenged the call yesterday for Chicago? Did they get it from the video coaches, or was Anders like, let's just take a roll of the dice here? Because there was an instance a couple years ago where the Luke Richardson had a perfect record in challenges except for one. And the one time he lost the challenge, it was because he overruled the video coaches and was like, hey, I'm just going to roll the dice here because I feel good about our penalty kill. And so I wonder if, like, the video coaches, Matt Meacham and Adam Gill, like, they watch a lot of hockey around the league and they study these goaltender interferences. So I'm wondering if in real time they felt, I don't think this is going to be goalie interference, but Anders, if you want to go for it, go for it. Or was it a situation where the video coaches felt, hey, we think this might be goalie interference? Anders, feel free to challenge. So I think maybe we'll get an answer on that later at practice today.
Yeah, and the dad's trip. They are now the Blackhawks 6-2-5 all time on the dad's trip. By the way, 6-4-2 on the mom's trip.
So same amount of wins, but the dads are picking up more points.
Yes, they are. Hey, did you see Dirk Bentley read off the starting lineup in the room yesterday?
I did. Is he a Blackhawks fan? Because he came to Chicago a couple years ago, and he like sang. I remember him singing like during one of the TV timeouts.
Right.
And then
I do remember that.
Yeah, and then like years prior, like during their cup run, I think he had some sort. So I don't know. He might be a Blackhawks fan, but
yeah,
cool.
I was looking up. I mean, he's no real ties to Chicago that I can tell. So yeah, but clearly he has some ties because he's been around this team a little bit. So the dad's trip will end Saturday night at the United Center when they host Vegas. Vegas, by the way, was the last team to play Nashville. Nashville beat them. So I think they've been off for a few days here in Chicago. So
I think Vegas has a game tonight.
Oh, they have a game tonight? Okay, all right.
Yeah. So it'll be the second of a back-to-back.
Playing tonight?
I want to say Carolina.
Okay.
I think Carolina. So
all right,
it'll be
good. We get well, we'll see how that goes. we'll get them on the back end of a back-to-back.
Perfect.
All right. Anything you want to share before we exit?
Nope. I don't got anything. How about you?
Are you going to work on the shootout at practice today, you think?
Well, we'll see. Remember they did that shootout game at practice before the Winter Classic, and they were there for 10 minutes and only one goal was scored?
Yeah, I do. And Spit and Chicklets had some fun with that.
Yes, I know. They Witt over-exaggerated the time on it. Wasn't a half hour, but it was. It got up there.
All right, that's going to do it for the Blackhawks Breakaway Podcast, presented by Toyota. Let's go places on CHSN. For Charlie Roumeliotis, I'm Pat Boyle. Thanks for watching and listening. We'll catch you next time.